Anonymous is the apparently the secret agent in this case. We'll see. As laid out yesterday and the day before in various rants here on this program, Anonymous, Karl Rove, the 2012 election fix, all that stuff. It's possible that Karl Rove used smart text servers in Chattanooga, Tennessee, to flip the vote totals in Ohio in 2004 and thus steal the election that year for George W. Bush. And it's just as possible that he tried to do the same thing this year on Mitt Romney's behalf, but was thwarted by the hacktivist group Anonymous. Many people have responded to these claims with a variation on, come on, that's impossible. A presidential candidate committing treason, that never happened. And if it did, it'd be front page news. Everybody know about it, right? Wrong. Consider some simple history. First Republican president in my lifetime was Dwight Eisenhower, and there's not a hint of scandal associated with his election in 1952. Maybe that's because he supported a 91% top marginal income tax rate on the rich. He approved of very popular New Deal programs like Social Security and unemployment benefits. As he wrote to his brother in 1954, should any political party attempt to abolish Social Security, unemployment insurance, and eliminate labor laws and farm programs, you would not hear of that party again in our political history. There's a tiny splinter group, of course, that believes you can do these things. A few other Texas oil millionaires and an occasional politician or businessman from other areas. Their number is negligible, and they are stupid. End of quote from President of the United States, Dwight Eisenhower, 1954, while he was president. But Eisenhower, in my opinion, was the last legitimately elected Republican president. Pardon my sneezes. Richard Nixon, who won the 1968 election against Vice President Hubert Humphrey, followed Eisenhower. At that time, the Vietnam War was raging, millions of students were in the streets, and President Lyndon Johnson, throughout 1968, was working desperately to bring a negotiated end to that war. He'd gotten both the North and the South Vietnamese to agree to terms of peace, and by late September, there was only a meeting in Paris to seal the deal. And then the CIA brought LBJ a wiretap they'd intercepted between the Nixon for President campaign and the office of the President of South Vietnam, Nguyen Van Thieu. Nixon basically told them that if they refused to go to the peace talks, or at least refused to go along with the peace agreement that LBJ had worked out with them, then Nixon would give them a much better deal after the election. LBJ was bat guano furious. I mean, this was treason. And because he could listen to the actual CIA phone intercepts, he knew that Richard Nixon was at the heart of it. So he called the senior Republican in the United States Senate, Everett Dirksen, one of the most honorable men to hold a Senate leadership position in generations, particularly among Republicans, and told him what was going on. Here's what he said.
Here's the latest information we got. The agent says that they just talked to the boss in New Mexico. And that he says that you must hold out. Just hold on until after the election. We know what Chew is saying to them out there. Yeah. We're pretty well informed on both ends. Now, I'm reading their hand, Everett. I don't want to get this in the campaign. That's right. And they oughtn't to be doing this. This is treason. I know.
Yeah. Everett Dirksen, the fabled, storied Republican leader. This is treason. Yes, I know. LBJ continued with this.
And I'm calling you only after talking to Rusk and Clifford and all of them, who thought that somebody ought to be notified as to what's happening. Now, I can identify them because I know who's doing this. I don't want to identify it. I think it would shock America if a principal candidate was playing with a source like this on a matter this important. Yeah. I don't want to do that. Yeah. But if they're going to put this kind of stuff out, they ought to know that we know what they're doing. I know who they're talking to, and I know what they're saying.
Now, Everett Dirksen promised to contact Nixon personally and try to put a stop to it, but in later conversations reported back to LBJ, Dirksen reported back to LBJ that Nixon wouldn't even discuss it with him. General Tew dug in his heels. The war continued. Humphrey lost. Nixon won the election. This is a historical fact. So why doesn't every American know that Nixon committed treason in '68 to win the presidency? Remember that conversation with Dirksen where LBJ said, I don't want to let this get into the campaign? That America would be shocked? He didn't want the American people to learn that one of the two candidates for president was a traitor. He was afraid it would so horrify and dishearten the American people that they'd lose faith in the American democratic system. In fact, we didn't even hear these tapes until just a few years ago when they were finally made public by the LBJ Library, and even then, they were largely ignored by the national press. LBJ went to his grave with this secret, as did Hubert Humphrey and the entire CIA team that outed Nixon. The American people were not to know that the Republican candidate who became president was a traitor. The next Republican to run was Ronald Reagan, along with CIA Director George H.W. Bush. At that time in 1980, the Shah of Iran had been stricken with cancer and left Iran for the U.S. for treatment. And Islamists had taken over the country, along with taking over our embassy and holding its occupants hostage. And Barbara Honegger, who has been on this program, she worked in the Reagan State Department. She wrote a book about that time called October Surprise. She and reporter Gary Sick, who also wrote a book of the same title, both reported that during the week of October 15th through the 20th, Reagan campaign director Bill Casey went to Paris and met with representatives of the Ayatollah, asking him to stop negotiating with Carter and just hold the hostages until after the election. If Iran would do this, Casey promised, we'd get them weapons for the U.S. supplied military that the Shah had amassed, and he'd route those weapons. Casey would route those weapons through Israel so no one would ever know. The Iranians said yes. And the next day, on October 21st, the Iranians inexplicably, at least to the Carter administration that thought it had worked out a deal, stopped negotiating. The world later learned that over the next 3 days, Israel began, now this is before the election even, over the next 3 days, Israel began shipping F-4 fighter jet tires to Iran, the first of many shipments of U.S.-made weapons to go that route over the next few years. I'll tell you the rest of this story right after this break for the